If you've been feeling overwhelmed or confused about the new SNAP work requirements, you're not alone. Thousands of people across the country are trying to figure out what these changes mean for them, and honestly, the rollout has been anything but smooth. Between the timing issues, the government shutdown complications, and the sheer scope of who's now affected, it's no wonder people are stressed. But here's what I want you to know. You have options, you have rights, and we're going to walk through every single detail so you can feel confident about your next steps. Most states started enforcing compliance checks for these new work rules beginning November 1st, 2025. Now, the fact that this deadline came during a government shutdown only added to the chaos and confusion. Many people didn't receive clear communication about what was expected of them, and that's led to a lot of unnecessary panic. The truth is, these changes went into effect when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed on July 4th, but implementation has been inconsistent across states. Some states are moving aggressively to enforce these requirements immediately, while others are taking a more gradual approach, particularly for people who recently recertified their benefits. Here's where things get serious. Under the new legislation, significantly more people are now classified as able-bodied adults without dependents, which means a lot more individuals are subject to work requirements than ever before. You're considered an able-bodied adult without dependents if you meet all of these criteria. You're between 18 and 64 years old. You're not caring for a child under the age of 14. You're considered physically and mentally capable of working. Let's talk about why this is such a big change. Previously, these requirements only applied to people up to age 54, and you were exempt if you cared for a child under 18. The new law pushed that age range all the way up to 64 and dropped the dependent care age down to 14. That means if you're caring for a 15-year-old, you're no longer automatically exempt. If you're 60 years old and living alone, you now have to meet these requirements. This expansion has brought literally millions more people into the work requirement system who were previously exempt, and many of them had no idea this was coming. If these rules apply to you, here's the bottom line. You must complete at least 80 hours per month of approved activity to continue receiving SNAP benefits beyond 3 months. Now, before you panic thinking you need to find a traditional job immediately, let me explain what approved activity actually means. You have several pathways. Employment, yes, traditional work counts. This includes full-time, part-time, temporary, or seasonal employment, job training, or employment programs. If you're participating in an approved workforce development program, vocational training, or employment preparation program, that counts toward your 80 hours. Education. If you're enrolled in college or a technical program at least half-time, you're meeting the requirement. This is huge for people who are trying to improve their situation through education. Volunteer work, unpaid work, or volunteer activities count as long as they're verifiable. You'll need documentation showing where you volunteered, when, and for how many hours. Self-employment. If you're a gig worker, freelancer, or independent contractor, you can meet the requirement. But here's the catch. Your eligibility depends on demonstrating consistent income. States want to see that you're actually logging those 80 hours and generating revenue from your work. This is where people get really confused, so let me break it down as simply as possible. If you're subject to work requirements and you don't meet them, you can only receive SNAP for 3 months within any 36-month period. These are called countable months. Here's the important part. These 3 months don't have to be consecutive. Let's say you receive benefits in January without working. That's countable month 1. Then you find a job in February and keep it through September so you're meeting requirements and those months don't count against you. But then you lose that job in October and don't find new work. That's countable month 2. The state keeps tracking this over a 3-year rolling window. Once you've used up your 3 countable months, your benefits stop until you either meet the work requirements or qualify for an exemption. Your countable months officially begin when you receive written notification from your state that you're subject to work requirements. And here's a critical protection. They must notify you at least 10 days before taking any adverse action against your case. That means if you're approaching your 3rd countable month, you should receive advance warning before your benefits are cut off. The federal guidance stated that these changes were effective upon enactment, and that state agencies must immediately screen for and apply the modified exemption criteria. But here's what that language doesn't clarify: whether states need to retroactively review every existing case or just apply the new rules to new applications and recertifications. Based on information from advocacy organizations and state implementation patterns, it appears that if you completed your recertification before November 1st, you might not see these requirements enforced until your next scheduled recertification, which could be 6 to 12 months away, depending on your state. However, some states are moving faster and applying these rules to all active cases immediately. This inconsistency is causing enormous confusion because someone in California might have a completely different timeline than someone in Texas or Florida. There's also speculation that recent discussions about requiring everyone to reapply for SNAP could be related to this issue. Mandatory reapplication would trigger immediate enforcement of work requirements across the board. As of now, there's no concrete mandate for universal reapplication, but that could change. Regardless of your state's approach, you have specific rights in this process. Your state is legally required to provide you with formal written notice before enforcing work requirements against you. This notice must explain what's being required of you, what your options are, and how to request an exemption if you believe you qualify for one. Additionally, you must receive written notice at least 10 days before your benefits are terminated for non-compliance with work requirements. This is why checking your mail is absolutely critical right now. I know it's tempting to ignore official-looking envelopes, especially when you're stressed, but these notifications contain essential information about deadlines and requirements. Missing a deadline because you didn't open a letter could result in losing benefits that you're actually entitled to keep. Here's some potentially good news. Many people who think they're subject to work requirements are actually exempt. Let's go through the exemption categories carefully. These exemptions should be applied automatically by your state, though I'd recommend verifying to be safe. Age-based exemptions. You're under 18, you're 65 or older. Pregnancy, you're pregnant at any stage. Dependent care, you're caring for a child under 14, or you're caring for an incapacitated person. Disability, you're receiving Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. You're receiving VA disability benefits. You have a medically verified disability that prevents you from working. Indigenous status, you're an enrolled member of a federally recognized tribe. You're an urban Indian. You live in California. Indian country, if any of these apply to you and your state tries to enforce work requirements, contact them immediately because there's likely been an error. These exemptions are legitimate, but your state may not know about them unless you provide proof. Medical inability to work. This is the most complex exemption, and we'll dive deeper into it shortly. Basically, if you're physically or mentally unable to work 20 or more hours per week on an ongoing basis, you're exempt, even if you're not receiving disability benefits. Unpaid caregiver status. If you're providing ongoing care for a disabled or elderly relative, you may be exempt, but you'll need to document this relationship and the care you're providing. Higher education enrollment. If you're enrolled at least half-time in college or a technical program, you're exempt, but you'll need to provide enrollment verification and proof of your course load. Substance abuse treatment. If you're participating in a drug or alcohol treatment program, you're exempt during the treatment period. You'll need documentation from your treatment provider. Already meeting other work requirements. If you're already complying with work requirements for another program like TANF, those hours can count, but you need to provide verification. Sufficient weekly earnings. If you're already earning at least 30 times the federal minimum wage per week, currently $217.50 per week, you're technically exempt because you're already working enough. You'll need to provide pay stubs or income documentation. Let me spend extra time on the medical exemption because this is where many people get stuck, and honestly, where many people who legitimately qualify for an exemption end up losing their benefits unnecessarily. The federal standard for this exemption is that you're physically or mentally unable to work 20 or more hours per week. Notice that it doesn't say unable to work at all. It's specifically about your capacity to work 20 plus hours weekly on an ongoing basis. This standard is significantly easier to meet than the Social Security disability standard. You don't need to prove you can't work at all or that you'll never work again. You need to demonstrate that due to your physical or mental health conditions, you cannot reliably work 20 hours per week. Think about what that might include: chronic pain conditions that make standing or sitting for long periods impossible, mental health conditions that make consistent attendance, or workplace stress, unmanageable chronic illnesses with unpredictable flare-ups that prevent reliable scheduling, multiple conditions that combined limit your capacity even if individually they wouldn't, recovery from surgery or injury that will take months but isn't permanent, conditions that are being treated but aren't yet stabilized. If you receive SSDI or VA disability, this should be handled automatically, but if you don't, you'll need medical documentation. Most states have a specific form. It might be called an ABAWD medical statement, medical release form, work limitation certification, or something similar. The exact name varies by state, but the form serves the same purpose. Here's what makes this form more manageable than you might think. It typically asks very straightforward yes or no questions. For example, the New York form asks, does this person have a temporary or permanent mental and/or physical health condition that limits their ability to work 20 or more hours each week? If yes, what is the time frame this person will not be able to work 20 plus hours weekly? Less than 30 days, 1 to 3 months, 4 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, more than 12 months, indefinitely. That's it. Those are the key questions your provider needs to answer. Getting this documentation can feel intimidating, especially if you don't have an established relationship with a healthcare provider. Here's my advice: who can complete this form? Your primary care physician, a specialist treating your condition, a psychiatrist or psychiatric nurse practitioner, a licensed therapist or counselor. In some cases, a social worker familiar with your medical history, how to approach the conversation. Be direct and honest. Explain that you need this form completed for SNAP benefits and that the requirement is about working 20 plus hours weekly, not about working at all. Bring a list of your symptoms, medications, and how your conditions affect your daily functioning. Many doctors are hesitant to write narrative letters because they're time-consuming and feel legally risky. But checking boxes on a standardized state form, that's much easier for them to agree to. If your provider says no, some providers are uncomfortable with these forms, particularly if they don't feel they know you well enough. If that happens, ask if they can refer you to someone else who can help, or consider seeking a one-time consultation with a provider who specializes in disability evaluations. The timeline matters. Don't wait until the last minute. If you've received a notice about work requirements and you believe you qualify for a medical exemption, start this process immediately. Getting an appointment and then getting the form completed can take weeks. Let me give you a concrete action plan based on your situation. If you haven't received any notices yet, check your mail daily for anything from your state SNAP agency. Make sure your address is current in the system. Review the exemption categories to see if any apply to you. If you think you qualify for an exemption that requires documentation, start gathering that evidence now. If you've received a notice about work requirements, read it carefully, multiple times if needed. Note any deadlines mentioned. Determine if you're meeting requirements through work, school, or volunteering. If not, assess whether you qualify for any exemptions. If you need to provide documentation for an exemption, start that process immediately. If you're approaching your third countable month, you should receive a 10-day notice before benefits stop. If you haven't, contact your state SNAP office immediately. Submit any exemption documentation you have, even if it's not complete. Consider requesting a fair hearing if your benefits are terminated and you believe you qualify for an exemption. If your benefits have been cut off, you have the right to request a fair hearing. Usually within 90 days, gather any documentation supporting your exemption claim. Consider contacting a legal aid organization for assistance. File the appeal request in writing and keep a copy for your records. You don't have to navigate this alone. Here are some places to turn for help. Legal aid organizations. Many areas have free legal services for low-income individuals facing benefits issues. Search for legal aid plus your state name. Community action agencies. These local nonprofits often have benefits specialists who can help you understand notices and gather documentation. State SNAP hotlines. Every state has a customer service number for SNAP questions. Yes, hold times can be long, but they can clarify what's being required of you specifically. Advocacy organizations, national organizations track how these requirements are being implemented and can provide guidance on your rights. Healthcare providers. Don't hesitate to ask your doctor's office if they have a social worker or patient advocate who can help with benefits paperwork. Final thoughts. You're not alone in this. I want to acknowledge how stressful and overwhelming this is. These requirements affect millions of people, many of whom are already dealing with health issues, caregiving responsibilities, limited job opportunities in their area, or other legitimate barriers to working 80 hours per month. If you're feeling frustrated, scared, or angry about these changes, though those feelings are completely valid. The implementation has been confusing, the timeline was terrible, and the communication from states has been inconsistent at best. But here's what I need you to remember. You have rights in this process. You have exemption options that might apply to you. You have the ability to appeal decisions you believe are wrong, and you have time to figure this out as long as you don't ignore those notices when they arrive. Take this one step at a time, read your mail, understand what's being asked of you, gather documentation if you need an exemption, reach out for help if you're stuck. You can get through this. And if you have questions we didn't cover here, don't hesitate to reach out to your local resources or advocacy organizations. There are people who want to help you navigate this system successfully. Stay informed, stay proactive, and remember, these benefits exist because you need them. And if you qualify for an exemption, you have every right to pursue it.